Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Julia Cutler, and I want to take a minute to say thank you for taking the time to be here with us. I'm joined today with Dr. Hendrie Weisinger. Welcome, Dr. Weisinger.
Hi,
We're very excited to have you here today.
thank
I'll
you.
give
I'm excited to be here.
great. I'll give some quick housekeeping information for our audience and then tell you a little bit more about Dr. Weisinger. There'll be time for questions at the end of the presentation, so please click the Ask a Question button right below the video to ask your questions throughout the webinar. Also, as a reminder, the recording will be available tomorrow. Now, to properly introduce Dr. Weisinger, Hendrie Weisinger, also known as Hank, is a world-renowned psychologist and pioneer in the field of pressure management, as well as the author of several best-selling books. He has consulted with and developed programs for dozens of Fortune 500 companies and government agencies. Welcome, Dr. Weisinger, and I'll take you away from here.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome everybody and appreciate everybody giving up their hour of their time to join me. I think you're going to find it, especially parents, very useful. Our topic is the unlikely art of parental pressure. And I want to start out by making a few comments about parental pressure and then talk about some strategies that you can use as a parent to transform unhealthy parental pressure into a very powerful force that can help your kids, whether they are youngsters or teens, navigate their life more effectively. Let me start out by making a comment that parental pressure is a global pandemic. Unhealthy parental pressure, that is. Studies conducted from all over the world, we're talking about from the UK, Australia, Germany, Israel, just about every country you can name, consistently shows that unhealthy parental pressure has extreme negative effects on your children. We are talking about eating disorders, substance abuse, lying, cheating, suicide. The list is endless. And here is the interesting point. These are all well-intentioned parents who are exerting unhealthy pressure. Parents do not wake up in the morning and think, how can I drive my kids nuts today? What can I do to negatively impact their mental health? So the reality is that parental pressure is inherent in every parent-child relationship because it has what psychologists like to call evolutionary utility. In other words, it benefits your child. An important point about parental pressure, which is defined as when your child perceives the expectations that you have as being almost impossible to meet. Everything about parental pressure is defined from the child's point of view. You might think you don't put unhealthy parental pressure on your child, fine. But if your kid says you do, you do. My co-author, Dr. Chris Thurber, and I have discovered that there are three differences that really account for how parental pressure becomes unhealthy. And these differences focus around communication, parental involvement, and parental warmth. And I'm going to give you some strategies in a few minutes that will allow you to take the unhealthy component of parental pressure and transform it into a force so that your child or teen experiences it as guidance, encouragement, support, and motivation. So we start out with that premise that parental pressure is in every parent-child relationship. That is why it is studied all over the world, and the results are basically the same. Unhealthy parental pressure hurts your child. And again, it is well-intentioned parents that are exerting the pressure on their kids because we all want our kids to do well. We want them to be the best thing, the best that they can be. So I want to start out by covering 3 areas. One, what does the parent bring to the table that starts to make pressure unhealthy? And let me point out a fact that I learned in the last book I wrote, which was called Performing Under Pressure. Nobody does better under pressure. That includes elite athletes. The edge, I learned, is not rising to the occasion. The edge is not doing worse in a pressure moment, not doing worse. So when parents put more pressure on their kids to perform, whether it's in school or whether it's on a athletic field, ironically, you're making it harder for your child to do their best. Nobody does better under pressure. Now, if we can look at the first slide that we can see, you will see that one of the terms that my co-author and I like to use are pressure parents. Think of it as a continuum. On the left, we have pressure parents. On the right, we have support parents. And these 7 factors are sort of wrapped up into the identity of what we call a pressure parent. And they take these factors to extreme, which make it worse for your kids. So as I go over these, few minutes devoted to each, I would like everybody listening to rate yourself on these variables. The first is scarcity of opportunities. Pressure parents see the world with limited opportunities. There's only so many kids who can get into Harvard. There's only so many kids who can make the tennis team or the football team or the soccer team or the cheerleading squad. Scarcity of opportunities. When a parent perceives the world with scarcity of opportunities, they quadruple the stakes for any task that their kid is engaging in. They will say things like, this is the biggest opportunity you're going to get. You're never going to get another chance. The second is competitiveness. You know, we think it's good to be competitive. Let me tell you something. Competition brings out the worst in people, not the best in people. Why do smart kids cheat? If they're so smart, why do they have to cheat? Well, one of the reasons is that they operate from a sense of competitiveness. They have to be better than the other person. Pressure parents are not concerned with keeping up with the Joneses. They are concerned with beating the Joneses. And when you make your son or daughter competitive, when you encourage competitiveness, what you are doing is creating within them what we call a ranking mindset. And a ranking mindset means that they will always be comparing themselves to others. So you can see how that puts them on a treadmill, because everything they do will never be good enough. They always have to be better than the other person. One of the messages I gave my kids is there's always going to be somebody smarter. There's always going to be somebody better looking. There's always going to be somebody richer. Don't compare yourself to other people. What support parents do is that they create what we call a mindset of excellence, which focuses on your personal best, developing yourself. So if you are one of those parents that really operates in a competitive world, again, you're making it harder for your son or daughter to do their best, not easier. The third is importance. Are you one of those parents where everything your kid does, this is the most important test you're ever going to take? Actually, here's a point to remember. The more important you make something, the more pressure you experience. It is counterintuitive, but telling your son or daughter the SATs is just another test is really a smart thing to say, rather than, you better study, this is the most important test you will ever take. Again, that intensifies the amount of pressure they are experiencing. Urgency becomes the next factor. Are you one of those parents who it's first day of Christmas vacation and the first thing you say to your kids is, you better start on your homework now? Urgent. You have to do it now. Everything is now. A sense of urgency. That is a terrible way to live. You know, when I was in graduate school, I was at the University of Kansas, and I see that, and I hope that many people from KU are actually tuning in today. But when I was a graduate student, one of the things I did was I took off my watch. And by taking off my watch, it slowed me down. Now I don't even wear a watch. You have a phone. If you want to know the time, you can ask somebody. But I noticed that I didn't live by the clock. And that's what parents who have a sense of urgency do. They are always putting their kid on a time schedule. That is a terrible way to live, because the child is then using psychological resources needlessly when they might be more useful at a later time. Perfectionism. See how these fit together. Because there is a scarcity of opportunity, because everybody is competitive, because this is so important, you have to do it now, and it better be perfect. It better be perfect because the competition is so tough. You can't afford to make a mistake, is what the pressure parent says to their kid. Everything has to be perfect. Perfectionism is one of the worst traits that a person can have, because, again, whatever they do will never be good enough. The perfectionistic parents will say to their kids, "You got a 95? How come you missed 2 questions?" Nothing is ever good enough. And finally, the last factor is that pressure parents are very controlling. And one of the reasons they are controlling, and by that I mean they're always looking at their kids. They're always like supervising them. And I have found the core reason for that is that they do not trust their kids to succeed. A very important point is trusting your kid to succeed. See, most parents don't do that. Most parents don't realize when they say, "Did you do your homework?" Why is a parent even asking that question if they don't trust if they trust their kid to succeed? The support parent assumes that the child, the teen, has done their homework or has done their task or their chores because they trust them to succeed. So as you think about these factors, I want you to rate yourself on them. How competitive are you? Do you see the world as a scarcity of opportunities? Where are you on the urgency scale? We always say that you have to slow down and smell the roses. That's exactly what I would tell your teen to do. So these are the factors that really make up what we like to call a pressure parent. And remember, parental pressure starts with parental expectations. I would like everybody to step back after we are finished and think about the expectations you have for your kids. Where do those expectations come from? Just because your parents had certain expectations for you, one of them might have been being a great student, that doesn't mean that those expectations make sense for your son or daughter. It is very important that your expectations are child-centered, because that's how you start to make them realistic. I have found that many parents confuse or conflate their own aspirations with the expectations they have of their kids. I have met many fathers who were frustrated athletes, so now they want their kid to become a great athlete. I have met many parents who wanted to go to a top school, maybe become a doctor or a lawyer, but they didn't have the, quote, opportunity. Maybe they didn't have the grades. So they put that on their kids. How many times in a movie have you seen, I never had these opportunities. You should be happy that your mom and I are giving you these opportunities. You see it all the time, but all that really does is it intensifies pressure, because you're putting your son or daughter in a situation of which they're not interested in. A message to remember is always be child-centered with expectations, and allow your son or daughter to develop their own interests rather than follow your lead for what they should be interested in. Now, my co-author and I have come up with ways that are in the book, and I will show you a book that I'm very proud of, The Unlikely Art of Parental Pressure, that can transform unhealthy parental pressure to healthy parental pressure. And if we can look at the next slide, I want to give you some points that you can do that encapsulate those transformations. Now, these are things that you should be doing every single day. They're not one-shot events. The first thing that you need to do every day is validate your kids' self-worth. One of the things my father used to tell me is no matter what you get on the test, I still love you and you are still a good person. See, many kids, and this is especially true for teen athletes, their self-esteem is built into how they perform. That's their identity. So this is the same thing in the corporate world, like with top producers in the financial world. A financial advisor feels good about him or herself if they are a big producer. If they are a low producer, they think that they are worthless. So you always want to let your kid know. And when I use the word kid, I'm using that from youngster all the way to a teen. You always want to know that you hold them in high regard and that they can be proud of themselves. I find it almost comical when parents say, I'm proud of you. I would tell my kids when they were successful, be proud of yourself. It is not your child's job to make you proud. How would you like it if your kids came home and they said, Dad, Mom, make me proud of you. Dad, all the other kids get picked up in a Honda, rather in a Mercedes. You pick me up in a Honda. Could you work a little harder so I can be proud of you? Mom, all the other mothers look good. You're 30 pounds overweight. Make me proud of you. Go to the gym. But mothers say that to their daughters every single day. 2 is to exhibit unconditional acceptance. One of my favorite movies is Searching for Bobby Fischer. It's about a young chess prodigy. There was a scene where he loses to somebody he should have beaten, and the father is giving him a lot of negative criticism. And it's raining. They're outside in the scene. And the son finally says to his father, the kid is only about 8 or 9 years old. He says, Dad, why are you standing so far away from me? Father realizes what he's doing, and then he comes and he hugs his kid. The point is that many parents set up their parent-child relationship like it's a sports contract. You do well, you get all the perks. You don't do well, you get nothing. Unconditional acceptance means that regardless of how your kid performs, what they do, you still show them that you love them. That does not mean that you have to approve of everything they do or even like what they are doing. But it does mean that you will be supportive to them. Unconditional acceptance becomes like a blanket of support, and it allows your son or daughter to take risks because they know that if the outcome isn't what they had hoped for, they can still seek comfort from you. 3, encourage them to do their personal best. Now, this ties in with competitiveness. Accept the fact your son or daughter is not always going, if ever, to be number 1. Stop telling them to be better than their friends. What you want to focus on is just getting them to do their best. So one day, and this turns into self-motivation. One day, my son, when he was in, I think it was 9th grade, he did a project on tornadoes, all by himself, a science project on a big piece of cardboard. So he says to me, all right, Dad, if you were my teacher, what would you give me? And I'm thinking to myself, sweet. Because when my daughter would say that, if I said a B, she'd say, how do I get a B plus? If I said A minus, how do I get an A? If I said a C, how do I get a C plus? So I'm thinking, he's going to be like his sister and have the same response. So I walk around his project and I say, Danny, I'm going to be very honest with you. If I was your teacher, I'd have to give this a B-. He pauses for a second and he says, I can live with that. I was taken back. I never anticipated that response. Now, 2 weeks later, same situation. Dad, if you were my teacher, what would you grade my composition? And I'm thinking, no matter what I say, he's going to say, I can live with that. So I gave it some thought, and I wasn't going to say an untrue grade. So I said to him, Danny, is this your best? Because if it's not your best, I don't want to see it. I only want to see it if it's your best. And here's the bind. I said to him, only you know the answer to that. He pauses for a second. No, it's not really my best. Okay, then don't show it to me. Only show it to me when it is your best. Now, 20 years later, when he will ask me, he's very successful in the recruiting business, he will ask me to edit a blog that he has written or something. I will say to him, Danny, it's good enough. And his response is, I don't want it to be good enough. I want it to really be good. He has actually internalized doing his personal best. Carl Lewis, the great track star, says that when he was in a running, he never thought about beating the guy next to him. All he focused on was doing his best. Now, the caveat is your best might not be good enough. Your best might not be good enough. You might do your best on a test and you get a 90. The reality is, sorry, a 90 is not good enough. I have seen, especially with professional athletes, that when they lose a match, whether it's tennis, a baseball game, whatever it is, they never feel bad if they did their best. That's when they give their opponent credit. They only feel bad when they performed below their capability. So always encourage. That should be the expectation. That is the prime parental expectation that you should have of your son or daughter, that you expect them always to do their best. 4 is to encourage them to express gratitude. That might sound a little silly for some, but I would encourage each parent listening to encourage your son or daughter to sit on a couch 5 minutes a day and think about all the things that they have to be grateful for. Their friends, their parents, the things that you give them, their relationships. I do that maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I'll sit on a couch and I'll think of all the things that I am grateful for. And I will tell you, it always makes me feel better. Encourage your son or daughter to self-disclose. Self-disclosure means that you are revealing your thoughts and feelings. You know, it's interesting when we talk about thoughts and feelings, because thoughts and feelings are the most important part of communication in any relationship, but they're also the riskiest form of communication. Your son or daughter are taking a risk when they tell you what they really think, what they tell you how they really feel, because what pressure parents do is they evaluate their thoughts and feelings. They will say things like, well, you shouldn't feel that way. What a silly thing to say. They do feel that way. Doesn't it make more sense to validate their feelings, and then you can discuss them and explore them? So encourage self-disclosure. One of the ways you can do that is, as a parent, you self-disclose. Use sentences like I feel, I think when you are conversing with your children, and you will get them to use the same words. The reason getting them to self-disclose is important is so when they are under a lot of stress, which you may have nothing to do with, something that's bothering them, they will be more likely to share those thoughts and feelings with you so that you can help them. It is a terrible thing for anybody, but especially a teen, to have to bottle up feelings and thoughts because they don't think that they can trust somebody. The more you get your son or daughter to self-disclose their inner world, the more that they will start to trust their parent. Encourage relaxation. Encourage relaxation. That means make this a family activity. I know that none of you practice relaxation with your son or daughter for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, Google a relaxation exercise and you will find hundreds of them, and it becomes a good activity. It's very important to get your son or daughter to learn how to relax on cue. That comes in handy. It comes in handy when they are taking a test. It comes in handy if they are performing, giving a musical recital, a dance recital. It's very important to learn how to relax on cue. And practicing relaxation also has another benefit. It reduces the daily feelings of stress and pressure that we all experience. And finally, get your kids to do things only if they're interested. I had a 16-year-old once whose mother was determined that he play the violin. He had no interest in playing the violin. I finally told him, I said, look, tell your mother she loves the violin so much, tell her to take violin lessons, and you can tell her where to put the bow as well. Many parents force their kids into activities in which the child has no interest in, but the parents are interested in it. Live your own life. Don't put your interest on your kid. You can encourage the interest to see if they like it, but don't force it. So up to this point, remember, I went over some of the factors that the parent brings to the table, that sense of urgency and competition and making your kid always be perfectionistic. Parents, by the way, who encourage their daughter with perfectionistic habits are basically putting her on the road to establishing a eating disorder. And we talked about some things that you can do every day that will promote your teen's mental health. But now I want to focus on some strategies that you can use that will literally help your son or daughter perform effectively under pressure. Let's look at that last slide now. Teach your teen how to perform under pressure. Look at the first. Befriend the opportunity. The biggest difference between people who do well, and when I say well, I do not mean better than they normally do, because that is extremely rare. People who do their best in a pressure moment versus people who do not do their best, the biggest difference is how they perceive the situation. Do you perceive it as an opportunity, a challenge, or fun, or do you perceive it as threatening? Befriend the opportunity. This test is just an opportunity for you to show the teacher your stuff. Think of the test as a challenge. Think of it as a sporting event, as having fun. If you watch, which I do, especially having gone to KU, college basketball, one of the things I've noticed that all coaches now say when their team goes out to be on the court is have fun. Derek Jeter, the great Yankee shortstop, Hall of Famer, gave me the quote that, of course, it's a pressure moment when you go up to hit in a key situation. But the way he deals with it is he said, this is what I wanted to do since I've been 8 years old. This is fun for me. So befriend the opportunity. If you can't befriend the opportunity, it's very hard to be confident because you can't be all in. You'll always have a sense of trepidation. 2, always explain to your teen multiple opportunities. You're going to get another chance. See, this counters the pressure parent who's saying, this is the most important test of your life. You know how many important tests I've had? I remember when I was taking multivariate statistics in graduate school and I was worried about the exams, and my professor, Dr. Poggio, the great Dr. Poggio, as we called him, would always say to me, Hank, it's just another test. By thinking of it as just another test, it reduces the pressure that you feel in the moment because it's not a do or die situation. When you think that this is the biggest opportunity you're ever going to have, you'll never get another chance like this. It makes it a do or die situation. Now, for your ancestors 25,000 years ago, further back, yes, it was a do or die situation if you didn't get away from the predator, if you couldn't find food. We treat things today like it's a do or die situation, but in reality, it really isn't. 3, teach your teen to focus on what they can control. My father used to say, don't worry about the other guy. You can't control what they do. You can't control what they look like. You can't control how much they study. You can only control what you can control. So a good strategy is always tell your son or daughter, what can you control for this? Well, you can control how much you study. You can control how much you practice. You can control what you are thinking. You can control how you breathe in the moment. Focus on what you can control because it gets rid of those distracting thoughts of what other people are doing. Now, this might sound hokey, but there's a considerable amount of research that shows this is very effective. Before your teen is going to enter into a pressure moment, and I would say this for you too. Let's say you have a big presentation that you're giving tomorrow. Studies have shown that if you write down your anxieties the night before, those anxieties are less likely to surface during the heat of the moment. So taking the SATs tomorrow, I want to write down my anxieties, which for a teen might be, if I don't do well, I'm not going to get into a good school. I'm going to disappoint my parents. My friends will laugh at me. I'm going to be embarrassed. These are all the concerns. And again, what we find is if you literally write down those, not think about them, but literally write them down, those pressure thoughts, those distracting thoughts are less likely to surface when you are engaged in that pressure task the next day. Breathing. Breathing is something we do naturally, but I want you to practice your breathing so you can regulate it. One of the movies, I forgot the name of it, with George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, they're stranded in space, they're astronauts, and Sandra Bullock is starting to freak out. And the first thing George Clooney says to her is, just breathe, because regulating your breathing is the fastest way to regain control over your autonomic nervous system. And then when you start to breathe at a more normal rate, because when we're anxious, that breathing is speeding up. So you want to slow it down. It's like when you're angry. The generic strategy for managing anger is to slow down. If your teen is angry about something, a good strategy to use is, could you speak a little slower so I can understand what you are saying? Because most likely they might be yelling or screaming and speaking faster. Getting your teen to take a deep breath and to practice breathing will allow him or her to be more in control of themselves when they have to perform under pressure. And finally, I want you to minimize the importance of the situation. This is what I said is counterintuitive. See, it's counterintuitive to say, don't worry about the SATs, it's just another test. Now, some people, parents, will say, that's unrealistic. It's unrealistic to minimize the importance of something that is that important. And I agree with you. However, it is equally unrealistic to be able to say, this is the most important test of your life. I would say that I've taken 500, quote, the most important tests of my life, and I cannot even remember 10 of them. But I remember at the time, most important test, and that did not help. All that did was make me more nervous. So these are some strategies that you can use to help your teen perform under pressure in a situation when they want to do the best. Now, I want to backtrack before we start to get into questions. And I said that there is some significant differences between pressure parents and support parents in 3 key areas: communication, parental involvement, and parental warmth. First, in communication. we found that there were 3 areas that separate pressure parents from support parents, and they involve praise, criticism, and questions. For example, pressure parents will, when they give praise, they will say things like, good job. See, that is very generic, but the reason pressure parents say that is they are only concerned with the outcome. All they care about is the results. All they care about is what did you get on the test. They do not care about your effort. They do not care about how long the teen studied, only the outcome. So they give it very generically, whereas as a support parent will say things that are very specific, such as, I really like the part of your audition where you played that piece, or I really like the way of how you answered that specific question. See, when you are specific, when you give praise, your son or daughter knows that you were paying attention to them. I would find that when I was giving a presentation and somebody came up to me afterwards and said, oh, great job, that was totally meaningless. Why was it a great job? Because I finished on time? I have no idea. Was it a great job because I made you laugh? Who knows? So praise was one factor. 2 was criticism. Pressure parents will use criticism to point out the flaw, what they did wrong. Support parents will use criticism to teach, to educate. Look at the father who says, I can't believe you let that ground ball go through your legs. You led in 3 runs, you blew the game. I didn't realize you were that bad. How do you think that kid feels his next Little League game? He won't even be in the Little League game because the morning of, he will get a stomach ache. Compare that to the coach or father who says, next time there's a ground ball hit to you, just bend down and block it. Next time actually implies, I trust you to succeed. So the next time you criticize your son or daughter, ask yourself, are you helping them? Or are you hurting them? Are you making it a teaching moment, or are you making it a scolding moment? And the third communication difference was around questions. Start to think of how you use questions. Pressure parents will use questions to interrogate. What did you do today? What did you get on the test? Who did you speak to? Who did you play with? Support parents will use questions to get their son or daughter to articulate their feelings, their interests. They will say things like, tell me how you feel about this, or what did you think about this? And not evaluate, but turn their answers into a dialogue. Pressure parents, when they communicate, are often giving a monologue rather than a dialogue. So criticism, questions, and praise. Start to think about how you use those communication tools. Now, here's the rule with parental involvement. If it's the right amount of involvement, your kids will tell you that you are supportive. If it's too much involvement, your kids will tell you that you are intrusive. And one of the things that pressure parents ignore, and I'm asking you to become more sensitive to, is the idea of boundaries. Respect your kids' boundaries. Pressure parents don't even think twice about walking into their 14-year-old's room without knocking on the door. They think nothing of it, of picking up their cell phone, looking at their text messages, of if a letter comes in the mail, opening up. They are always invading the boundaries. What support parents do is they respect the boundaries and they let them grow. You know, the rule of thumb is this. Your boundary, your parental boundary, needs to be permeable, meaning your son or daughter can enter it at any time because you want them to come to you when they have issues. However, the teen's boundary is not permeable. You have to respect that. You have to let it grow and grow and grow. How you involve yourself in your 5-year-old's life obviously will be very different than how you involve yourself in their life when they are 25. But pressure parents do not make that distinction. They are doing the same thing. And the third area has to do, which we talked about, parental warmth. Now, you can think you're the warmest parent in the world, but not if your kid says no, that you're not. You know, I have pointed out to my co-author many times that I'll see parents dropping their kids off at school, and I see the father shaking the hands of their son. What is that about? You're shaking their hand. You're not giving them a hug. Start to think of all the ways of how you can communicate warmth. And one of the most important is tactile communication. Hand, an arm around the shoulder, pat on the back. This communicates a sense of warmth. Remember, all of us were born wet and cold, and it is the maternal instinct to pull the infant close. Nobody has to tell the mother, keep your baby warm. We do that instinctually. So you have this warmth, and yet I have found that many parents are very cold in expressing warmth, even if they think they are. You don't see them laughing with their kids. You don't see them hugging their kids. So that is something that I want you to take into account. So remember, parental communication, parental involvement, parental warmth. Think about how you operate around those factors in the context of your relationship with your child. Now, I see it's about 12:41, and now might be a good time to pause and see if we have any questions.
Hi, yes, we definitely have some questions for you. So we will start with a question from Laura. You mentioned that you don't wear a watch, and you don't think that putting kids on a schedule is a good idea with reminding them about the time all the time. So how do you manage good sleep habits, school routines, and after school activities without focusing on what time it is?
Okay, so thank you for the question, Laura. Let me say, it isn't a question of the time. It is a sense of urgency, hyper urgency. So that would mean that, let's say that you do have your kid on a schedule in an activity from 9:30 to 10:30. So the pressure parent is saying at 10:25, hurry up and finish. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about running your day by a clock. I'm talking about the psychological urgency that you're always in a rush. You're never, quote, relaxing. And I found that parents who always live with a sense of urgency, they have to do it now, are communicating that same style to their kids. Bedtime is 8:00. Okay, so we're going to go to bed at 8:00. You're still keeping on a schedule, but it is the urgency, the demeanor of how you do that. Everything in your life does not have to be done with a sense of urgency. Urgency is more for a life or death situation. Then it's urgent. It is not urgent that you get somewhere at 9:02 when the starting time is 9:00. Of course you want to be on time on things, but what I'm saying is that don't make a minute late into a catastrophic situation. So it's slowing down, it's keeping on a schedule, but slowing down. So I know that I have to be at a certain place at a certain time, but I'm not going to flip out if I am going to be a minute or 2 minutes late. Now, when I lived in Los Angeles and I was very competitive, I did live like that, and it was not comfortable. So that's the best I can do with that one.
Okay, great. Melissa would like to know, when you say that, you talked about parents putting pressures on the kids, would you say that schools put similar pressures on teens?
Absolutely. And we have a whole chapter on that in the book. Let me show you the book again. There it is. It's a good cover. And why do schools do that? If it's a private school, the answer is obvious, because the parent is sending their kid to that private school so their kid can get into a prestigious college. The real change needs to be with higher education and having different factors, because now you go into school and there are standardized tests that you have to take. In New York, you take the Regents test and so on. So schools, many of them are doing the same thing. Now, I will tell you, as I said, that when I was a graduate student and was taking my multivariate statistics course, I never felt that the professor was putting pressure on. They had the attitude. We had 4 assignments. They were due at the end of the year. And it was always just do your best and just focus on learning. And if you focus on learning, you will be able to do well on these four tasks that we had to complete. So yes, teachers do the same. And here it's going to be up to the individual teacher to interact with the child in a way that the teacher believes can get the child to be the best person that they can be, both in the classroom and outside the classroom. But there will always be pressure to perform in elementary school and in high school because of the university system, which is, as we all know, becoming more and more selective.
Okay. When you talk about student athletes, that's a lot of pressure there with student athletes. A lot of times, like you mentioned, the parents are kind of like living vicariously through their sons or daughters. Josh wants to know, he said, my son gets visibly upset when he makes a mistake in sports. How can I help him handle this?
One of the ways you can help him handle that is to use other athletes as a model. If you watch any sporting event, whether it's a baseball game, I'm watching the Yankee game last night, and the guy tries to score, he should have stayed up. Well, that was a mistake. You shrug it off. But using athletes and putting it on your son, what is his expectation? Does he expect never to make a mistake? Does he expect never to win? Because if he has that expectation, he's always going to be disappointed. So the important thing there is to help your son learn how he can perform better and move on to the next task, and with the message that every athlete, every baseball player strikes out. Every basketball player misses foul shots. Everybody in the corporate world makes mistakes. You don't want him to be perfectionistic, because then whatever he does will never be good enough. And it's also important to remember, as a student athlete, let's be realistic. This is hard for many sports parents to accept. Is your son really going to the Olympics? Is he really going to the major leagues? I lived in Westport, Connecticut. And I used to tell parents there, the only way somebody from Westport, Connecticut, which is a fairly affluent community, is going to the NBA, Major League Baseball, or the NFL, the only way somebody from this town is going is as team physician, limited partner, or as the team attorney. That is it. Nobody is going to be starting on the New York Knicks. So you have to keep your son's perspective in that he's a student athlete. He should be enjoying it. If he's not enjoying it, if he's not having fun, then he should do a different activity, because there will always be disappointment.
Yeah, good answer on that one. Here's another side to all of these pressures. The influence of social media. How does that play into this space? Specifically, children are getting volumes more inputs and pressures outside of the home. How do parents monitor and manage that?
Okay, that's a great question. And I, have recently done some work with the head coach of the U.S. soccer team. And he told me that it's one of the big problems with pressure is that the players go on social media and they will start to read things like, this player stinks. How could we waste money? Why do we have them? And they're reading what reporters say. And obviously the answer is get off social media. Social media, especially as we're hearing now with Facebook and Instagram, can have a very detrimental effect. And you either have to be able to ignore what you are reading on social media or keep it in context, or to limit the amount of screen time that you have. It is there. So it becomes a choice. And I would say that when I read things, it's like me reading a bad review of my book or a bad review of something, that I've done or something. That will have a slight impact on me, not destroy me, but it will have an impact because we are all sensitive to what other people think. So I think that the best way to handle that is to have discussions with your teen. What are they looking at? What are they reading? Because in that discussion, you can start to challenge the truth value. Just because something is on social media does not mean that it is valid. So I think validating the information, limiting time, not reading things that are going to upset you, would be part of the solution.
Okay, good. A question from Jen. She wants to know how to motivate a kid properly when they are not a self-motivated person.
Great question. And I think there are many ways of how you can communicate, but I think the essence for that is to instill in your son or daughter just to do their best and to get them to do their best. You don't want to motivate necessarily by incentives. And incentives actually are what I like to call pressure traps. So the parent who says, you do well on that test tomorrow and you're getting that new iPhone. Well, the kid wants some insurance. So what does he do? As soon as the parent's out of the room, I really want that iPhone. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do on the test. So I better make a nice little crib sheet. That's one of the reasons that incentives sometimes work against us, because people want the incentive so much, they will do whatever it takes to get it, including cheating, lying, for example. So I like to motivate the kid to do his best by putting responsibility on them. My son once asked me, Dad, will I get something good if I do well in school? And I said, no. I said, I give you things because I love you. That has nothing, your schoolwork is your business. If you want to be the dumbest kid in your class, hey, that's up to you. If you want to have to stay after and do your homework every day with the teacher standing over you, that is up to you. So I would say that the mistake that parents make, because they don't want to see their kids fail, is they get too involved in that homework process, and sometimes even to the point of doing the homework for their child, because they don't want the child to fail and they don't want their child to experience negative consequences. So I find the best way to motivate your kid to do their best is to allow them not to do their best and thus accept the natural consequences of their behavior. It's very important for parents to make their kids realize that there is a connection between what the kid does and the consequences that they have. So when the teacher administers consequences, that is better than the parent administering consequences, because the teacher's consequences are a natural result of what the kid did. And if he doesn't like the consequences the teacher is giving, be it a low grade or detention or whatever, then he or she can do something about it. How many times have you seen in the movies again, the teen is a loser and then something happens and then they become self-motivated? Self-motivation is about wanting to do your best, not winning. That's different, but wanting to do your best.
Okay, great. And then to the flip side of that, what if you have a child that puts a lot of pressure on himself and is like, I don't know if this is a correct term, of being over motivated or without parental pressure to succeed?
Why is the child doing that? And I would say one of the things he's doing that is because somehow in his world, he or she believes that doing their best is a way of pleasing the parents. That child might not. So one of the interventions then is the parent to show that unconditional acceptance, validate their self-esteem, validate their self-worth. You don't have to get 100 for you to be a great kid. You're a great kid whether you get a 0 on the test or whether you're 100. I love you either way. I think it's a good idea many times to celebrate the imperfections. One of my professors once told me the story of a kid who was a straight A student, and when they came home with a B, the parents had a party for the B. This is a special event. You finally got a B. Let's celebrate that. You don't have to be perfect. So I think that is the way. It worries me when I see a kid get upset because, quote, they weren't perfect. And that's where the parent can help by helping the child get in touch with their expectations. Do you expect to get 100 every single time? Do you expect to be first in your class, first in the race, first on the team every single time? So what you're doing is helping the kid formulate realistic expectations for themselves.
Okay, great. Todd had a question. Where does the absentee parent fit on the pressure parent or the support parent continuum?
It's a great question. And by absentee parent, I will assume that you are only periodically involved in your child's life. Just like in terms of like, you know, the mother's with the child, the father has visiting rights, or vice versa. I think the only thing you can do in that situation is focus on your own relationship with the child and to be supportive and encouraging in case they are not getting that from the parent who is in charge. In other words, just have the best relationship that you can. Frequent communication is a way. An email maybe every other day, a letter, write down your feelings, let your kid know how you are feeling. Just because you are absentee does not necessarily mean that you do not love him or her. I think it's smart for that absentee parent to speak with the school whenever he or she can, whenever it is permissible, and with the other parent so that you can fully understand the emotional landscape of your child. If you see something that bothers you when you are with your child, then that information should be relayed back to the other parent to see whether that's just happening with you in that situation or whether that it is something that is chronic. So it's a tough situation because you have limited contact, but limited contact is not the same as zero contact.
Great. And then one last question I think we have time for. You talked about 6 characteristics of pressure parents. Can you give us some key characteristics of what you would see in a supportive parent?
And a support parent, yes. And a support parent, you will see that their expectations are based on the child's abilities, their interests, their capabilities. In a support parent, you will see unconditional acceptance. You will see a lot of warmth in terms of encouragement. You will see them being very supportive. You will see support parents respecting the choices that their kid makes. You'll see them, rather than have a monologue, they will have a dialogue, an exchange of thoughts and feelings. You will see them respecting the boundaries of their kid. You will see them involving the kid in decision making. See, pressure parents are only concerned with the decision, the outcome. Support parents are more interested in how the kid arrives at the decision. They will help them with their problem solving skills. So those are some of the ways. Support parents engage and involve the child in decisions that impact the child, the teen. So pressure parents will say, I'll pay for your college. This is where you're going. Support parents will say, of course, I'm going to pay for your college. I just wanted to make sure that it is the right school for you. Pressure parents are concerned with getting their kids into the best school. Support parents are concerned with getting their kids into the right school. The right school might not be the best school that your kid can get into. So those would be some differences.
Great.
What I want, again, reiterate that parental pressure is a force. You know, if everybody squeezes your hand, you know, push down on it, you start to feel pressure. That's how I want you to think of parental pressure. It is a force. And unfortunately, most parents use that force in an unhealthy way by guilting their kids. Look how much money I paid for your lessons and you're not even practicing. How could you treat us like this after all we've done for you? They have all subtle ways of putting unhealthy pressure on their kids. Think if you're dancing with your kids and you're wearing high heels. It's only a matter of time before you step on their feet. And if you're wearing stiletto heels, that's going to hurt. Support parents think of it as wearing sneakers. So if they step on their kids' feet, it's not going to hurt as much. When parents can use parental pressure in a positive way, they transfer that force. Instead of pushing down and hurting, they turn it into a sense of encouragement, support, guidance, comfort, and wisdom. And when you can do that as a parent, then that becomes a guaranteed way that I can say to you, the force will be with you.
Well, thank you for that. That was definitely a enlightening webinar for us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Weisinger.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
And people should feel free to go to Amazon right now and
Yes.
get The Unlikely Art of Parental Pressure.
Yes.
Your kids will thank you.
Yes, the link to the book is right below the video. You can click on that. There's also a survey you can fill out about today's webinar and give us some suggestions for future video or webinars that you would like. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Weisinger, for your time.
Thank you. Thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining in. I appreciate it and appreciate the questions.
Thank you.